My name is Marlowe Ainsley. I was 17 when everything changed, and even now, 12 years later, I can still feel the exact weight of the paper in my hand. Thin, ordinary, the kind you'd use for a grocery list, not for ending a childhood. We can't do this anymore. Take care of yourself. We'll send money when we can. No signature. Just my mother's slanted handwriting, the same handwriting that used to write "Good morning, sunshine" on napkins tucked into my lunch bag. The house was quiet that morning in a way houses aren't supposed to be quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Empty quiet. I remember standing in the kitchen doorway in my school uniform, blazer half-buttoned, staring at the counter where the note sat weighted down by a chipped coffee mug, the one with the faded daisies that my little brother, Theo, used to drink his cocoa from. Theo was gone too. Both of them, and him, packed into a car sometime before dawn, leaving me behind like a piece of furniture that didn't fit in the new place. I didn't cry that first day. I remember that clearly, because I kept waiting for the tears and they didn't come. Just a strange, hollow stillness, like my body hadn't caught up to what my mind already understood. You are on your own now. I was 17. I had $11, a half-used notebook of algebra homework, and a neighbor, Mrs. Okafor, who found me sitting on the porch steps that evening and didn't ask a single question before she said, "Come inside. Eat something." I didn't tell anyone at school what happened, not for a long time. I learned to say they're traveling for work the way other people say the weather's nice today. Automatic, hollow, believable enough that people stopped asking. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't have known, was that 12 years later, the two people who wrote that note would sit across from me at a small round table, hands folded, asking for the one thing I'd spent over a decade learning to live without needing from them: help. The first winter was the hardest, though I didn't understand yet that winters get easier the way a wound gets easier, not because it stops hurting, but because you build a different life around the hurt. Mrs. Okafor let me stay in her guest room until I could figure things out, which was her gentle way of saying indefinitely, and don't you dare feel guilty about it. I got a job at a print shop after school, 3 hours a day feeding paper into a machine that never once asked me why my parents left. I liked that about the job. Machines don't ask why. I kept a small notebook that year, not for algebra anymore, but for lists. Things I needed to learn that other people already knew: how to file taxes, how a lease worked, how to talk to a landlord like I was 25 instead of 17. I taught myself to sound older on the phone. I learned that if you lower your voice half a register and don't apologize before you speak, adults stop asking where your parents are. Theo called once, about 4 months in. I remember gripping the phone so hard my knuckles went white, hoping, I don't know what I was hoping, that he'd say, "Come get us." This was a mistake. Instead, he just said, in the small, uncertain voice of a 9-year-old repeating a script, "Mom says to say hi." Then the line went dead. I didn't hear from any of them again for almost 2 years. There's a particular kind of grief that doesn't have a name: grieving people who are still alive. You can't light a candle for it. Nobody brings you a casserole. You just carry it, quietly, the way you'd carry a stone in your coat pocket, heavy enough to notice, light enough that you learn to forget it's there until you reach for something else and feel it shift. I finished high school 2 years early by doubling up on courses, not out of ambition but out of a hunger to just be done, to reach some point where nobody could call me a runaway child anymore, where I'd have papers and diplomas and a job title that made the story unnecessary to tell. By 19, I had a studio apartment above a dry cleaner's, a job answering phones at a small accounting firm, and a silence inside me that I mistook for a long time for strength. It wasn't strength. It was just the absence of anyone to be soft with. By 24, I was someone else. Not in disguise, in construction. I had built myself the way you build a house after a fire, slowly, deliberately, with an eye toward what would hold weight and what wouldn't. I'd worked my way up at the accounting firm, then left for a financial analyst role at a mid-sized firm downtown, the kind of job that came with a laptop bag and a parking spot with my name stenciled on the concrete. I had a small apartment with actual furniture, not scavenged furniture. I had 2 friends, Priya and Noor, who knew the shape of my past without knowing every detail, the version of honesty that lets you be known without being examined. I did not have Theo. I did not have my parents. And for years, I told myself that was simply the arithmetic of my life, the way some people are born without a hand or a specific gene, not a wound, just a fact. Sometimes, at night, I'd catch myself doing something involuntary, setting the table for 4 out of habit before remembering it was just me. Buying cocoa mix in December because some old reflex remembered Theo liked it, then throwing it away in January unopened. I dated carefully. I let people close cautiously. There was a man, Elias, for almost 3 years, kind and steady, who once asked me, gently over dinner, "Do you ever think about finding them?" "No," I said, too quickly. He didn't push. But he watched me for a long moment in that quiet way he had and said, "You know, Mar, not looking for something is still a kind of looking." I didn't understand what he meant then. I do now. The truth is, I built an entire adult life in the exact shape of a door I refused to open. Every choice, the career, the apartment, the friendships that stayed pleasant and never too deep, was, in its own way, still responding to that note on the kitchen counter. Take care of yourself. I had. Almost too well. I had built a life so self-sufficient that there was no room left in it for anyone to actually need me, or for me to need anyone back. I told myself I was free. I was, in fact, just very well defended. The letter came on an ordinary Tuesday in March, forwarded twice, first to Mrs. Okafor's old address, then finally to mine, in an envelope soft at the corners from travel. I recognized the handwriting before I registered whose it was. That same slant. That same looping M. My name on the front, misspelled slightly, Marlowe instead of Marlowe, a small detail that told me everything about how long it had been. Inside, a single page. "We know we have no right to ask anything of you. Your father is sick. Theo found us again last year, and he's the one who found your address. We understand if you never want to hear from us. But if there's any part of you that would see us, we're staying at the Baymont on Route 9. We'll be there through Sunday." I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after reading it, the paper flat under my palm, feeling something I hadn't expected. Not rage, not relief, a strange, vertiginous quiet, like standing at the edge of a building and realizing the ground was much farther down than you'd thought. I called Priya first. She listened without interrupting, the way good friends do, and when I finished she asked only one question. "What do you want, Mar?" Not what's fair. Not what they deserve. What do you want? I didn't have an answer. Not that night. I thought about Mrs. Okafor, who had passed 3 years earlier, and how she used to say, "Anger is a room you can visit, sweetheart, but you shouldn't live there." I thought about the $11 in my pocket at 17. I thought about cocoa mix thrown away, unopened, every January for years. And underneath all of it, quietly, stubbornly, I thought about Theo, 9 years old on the other end of a phone line, reciting a message that wasn't his own. I didn't decide that night whether to go. I only decided I would let myself sit with the question instead of slamming a door on it, the way I'd slammed every door for 12 years. The lobby smelled like old carpet and coffee left too long on the burner. I stood outside room 114 for almost 10 minutes before I knocked, my hand hovering the way it had hovered over that kitchen counter 12 years earlier, as if some part of me still expected a note instead of a door opening. My mother answered. She was smaller than I remembered, not smaller in a way age explains, but smaller the way people get when life has been quietly taking pieces of them for years. Her hair had gone fully gray. Her eyes, when they found mine, did something I wasn't prepared for. They filled, immediately, without permission, the way water fills a crack it's been looking for. "Marlowe," she said. "Just my name." Like she was checking it still worked in her mouth. My father was in the chair by the window, thinner than I remembered, an oxygen tube resting under his nose. The tube's soft hiss the only sound in the room for a moment. He didn't get up. I don't think he could. And there, standing awkwardly near the bed, 21 now, was Theo. Not the boy from the phone call. A young man with my mother's slanted handwriting somewhere in the way he held his shoulders, uncertain, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to hug me or just nod. I chose the chair across from them, not the one beside my mother. A small thing, but important. I needed a table, even a metaphorical one, between what they wanted from me and what I owed them. We don't expect anything. My mother started, the words tumbling out too fast, rehearsed and yet not rehearsed enough. Your father's kidneys are failing, Marlowe, and there's no one else, and I know what we did. You left a note, I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. On a napkin, weighed down by Theo's mug. The room went silent except for the oxygen machine's steady hiss. I remember every word of it. I continued. I could recite it to you right now. I've had 12 years to memorize 11 words. My father's eyes, when they finally met mine, were wet and older than 60 should look. We were drowning, he said, his voice thin as paper. Debt, and there's no excuse, Marlowe. We tell ourselves there was a reason. There wasn't. There was just fear, and we were cowards, and you paid for it. It was the first time in 12 years anyone in that family had said the word cowards about themselves instead of waiting for me to say it. I didn't cry. Not yet. I sat there instead, feeling the old hollow stillness from that first morning settle over me again, except this time it wasn't emptiness. It was space, room to actually decide something instead of simply surviving something. I need to think, I finally said. I'm not going to answer that today. I left before anyone could say anything else, and in the parking lot, I sat in my car for 40 minutes before I could drive. For 3 days, I didn't sleep well. I kept replaying the room, my mother's face collapsing into relief and shame at once, my father's tube hissing, Theo standing there like a boy who'd grown up entirely without instructions. Priya, over coffee, asked me the question that finally cracked something open. Do you want to help them because you love them, she said, or because some part of you still thinks it'll prove you were worth staying for? I didn't answer her right away. I sat with it the way Mrs. Okafor had taught me to sit with anger, visiting it, not moving in. The truth, when it finally surfaced, was uncomfortable. It was both. I did still love them, in the strange, unkillable way you love the people who made you, even when they failed you. And yes, some very young part of me, still 17 somewhere underneath the analyst blazer and the parking spot with my name on it, still wanted to matter enough to be worth staying for. But I realized something else, too, sitting in my kitchen with the letter flattened under my palm again. Helping them didn't have to mean forgiving them. And forgiving them, if it came at all, didn't have to mean forgetting what the last 12 years had cost. I thought about calling Elias, 3 years gone from my life by then, just to say, you were right. Not looking was its own kind of looking that I didn't call. But I let myself think it, which was, for me, its own kind of progress. I made a decision that wasn't about revenge and wasn't about rescue. It was about drawing a line I could live inside, one that let me be useful without making myself disappear again the way I had at 17. I called the number on the letter. I'll help with the dialysis costs. I told my mother. I'll help find him better care. I'm not moving in. I'm not going to pretend the last 12 years didn't happen, and I need you to understand. I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do, not because I've forgotten anything. There was a long pause. Then, quietly, that's more than we have any right to ask for. I know, I said. That's exactly why I'm choosing it. Not because you're owed it. Because I get to decide who I am now, and I'd rather be someone who helps than someone who mirrors what was done to me. It was Theo who told me the rest of it, weeks later, over coffee in a diner near my apartment, the kind of ordinary place where hard truths become bearable simply because someone brings you a refill of coffee halfway through. They almost came back for you, he said, turning his mug slowly on the table. Twice, that first year. I remember Mom standing by the car with a bag packed. And then Dad would say something about the debt, about starting over clean, and they'd unpack the bag. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Not unkindly. Genuinely. Because I think you deserve to know it wasn't simple, he said. Not because it makes it okay. Because I don't want you carrying a story that's simpler than what actually happened. You didn't get left because you weren't enough. You got left because they were drowning and didn't know how to ask for help without feeling like failures. And somehow it became easier to fail you quietly than fail themselves loudly. I sat with that for a long moment, watching steam rise off coffee neither of us was drinking. I used to think you got the better deal, I told him finally. Staying with them. Theo laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. I got parents who were present and broken instead of a sister who is absent and better off. I don't think either of us got the better deal, March. I think we both just got different shapes of the same loss. It was the first time in 12 years someone from that family had said something that didn't ask me for anything, not forgiveness, not money, not understanding. Just the truth, offered plainly, like a hand held open instead of extended for something. I reached across the table and took his hand briefly. Not a big gesture, but real. "I'm glad you found me," I said. "Not because of them. Because of you." My father's treatment stabilized over the following months, though the doctors were careful never to promise more than they could deliver. I visited on Sundays, not every Sunday and not out of duty, but out of a slowly rebuilt willingness that I refused to force. My mother and I are not close, not in the way that word usually means. We are civil, careful, honest in a manner that took 12 years and one napkin's worth of words to earn. Sometimes she tries to apologize again more fully, and I let her, because I've learned that some wounds need to be acknowledged more than once before they stop aching every single time. I never got an explanation that made the note make sense. I don't think one exists. What I got instead was something quieter and, in its own way, more valuable. The truth that the people who hurt you can also, later, be people who need you, and that helping them doesn't erase what happened, doesn't obligate you to pretend, and doesn't make you the person you would have been if none of it had happened. I still have that grocery list note. I kept it, all these years, in the bottom of a drawer, the paper gone soft and thin as cloth. I took it out recently and read it again for what must have been the 1,000th time. We can't do this anymore. Take care of yourself. We'll send money when we can. They never did send money. Not once, not for 12 years. But I took care of myself anyway. I built a life, brick by careful brick, out of the very abandonment that was supposed to break me. And when they finally came back needing something, I discovered that the 17-year-old girl standing in that kitchen doorway hadn't disappeared after all. She'd just grown into someone strong enough to choose kindness without needing it to be deserved. That, I've come to believe, is the only kind of justice that ever actually heals anything, not punishment, not the mirroring of old cruelty, but the quiet, deliberate choice to become someone better than the people who once made you feel like you weren't enough to stay for. I folded the note back into the drawer, and for the first time in 12 years, closing it didn't feel like carrying a stone. It felt like setting one down. Some doors don't need to be broken down to be closed. Sometimes you just set the note back in the drawer and walk forward anyway. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever had to choose between the anger you deserve to feel and the person you wanted to become, you're not alone in that. If Marlowe's story stayed with you, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. These stories of quiet strength and family truth come every week. Drop a comment below. Would you have made the same choice she did? And if you know someone who needs to hear that healing doesn't require revenge, share this with them.